This is a podcast from the British Library. For more information, visit www.bl.uk/podcast.
Well, welcome all back for this afternoon, our final part of the conference. We'll be carrying on with panel 4. One of the nice things about organising a conference is that you get an excuse to bring together all of your favourite scholars into a room to come and communicate about the excellent work that they do, and that's certainly been one of the highlights for me. Now I have the pleasure of introducing two of my extraordinarily talented colleagues here at the British Library, Melodie Doumy and Kaledgew. Melodie is Curator of Chinese Collections with a particular focus on the Stein Collections from the Silk Roads. She has a BA in Art History, Anthropology and Archaeology, an MA in Museum Studies from Paris and an MPhil in International Relations from Cambridge. She was an assistant curator at the V&A, the Victoria and Albert Museum in London, before joining the British Library in 2015 as a curator and researcher with the International Dunhuang project. Her interests include the material cultures of China and the Eastern Silk Road, Buddhism and history of collections. Marie is Scroll and Digitalisation Conservator here at the British Library as well. She holds a BA in Art History and an MA in Museum Studies from Paris too, as well as a BA in Philosophy and an MA in Book and Paper Conservation, because you can't collect enough degrees. She trained for 2 years in Japanese paintings conservation at the Hirayama Studio, British Museum. The Japanese painting conservation at Hirayama Studio, British Museum, and joined the British Library here in 2017. Her interests include conservation theory and ethics, and East-West relationships in approaches and techniques of conservation. So, can you please give you a round of applause and welcome them to the stage.
Hello. So thank you first to Charles and Matt for inviting us to talk today. It's very exciting for us to be sharing what we do every day in our work life together. And also thank you, Matt, for the graveyard slot. Hopefully our talk will be captivating enough to keep you all awake after the lunch we've just been given. So let's just start. In our respective roles as conservator and curator, we're constantly reminded that manuscripts are more than bearers of text, and that's an idea that's been, repeated throughout the conference, I think. They're objects in their own right, and that belong to a given material culture, and in particular, in the case of Buddhist scrolls, they're also agents in religious practices. So today, by focusing on... How do we move on? This copy of the Lotus Sutra, which is catalogued under the number OR 8210/S2364, for those of you who would like to find it online. That's chapter 25. We will try to demonstrate how some of the manuscripts that are held in the British Library's Stein Collection carry clues about their history and function, as well as evidence of the beliefs and rituals that were alive among the Buddhist communities of the time. So to give you an idea, these manuscripts roughly date from the 5th to the 10th centuries, and they were found in the so-called Library Cave, or Cave 17, near Dunhuang in the Chinese province of Gansu. So they're being both sacred religious objects as well as important archaeological artifacts. They are key to our understanding of many aspects relating to the medieval period in China, especially given the scarcity of this material surviving elsewhere. So how do we ensure the accessibility of the scrolls and their content while preserving them for future generations? How can we retain all the precious information that they contain, and especially as we go through conservation?
So these case studies will unravel some of the challenges that are faced when conserving manuscripts, especially some of the ethical issues that come into play, and will show the range of tools used to make informed decisions. We hope also that this will highlight how important it is for us to constantly work together and share expertise. And in a way, the field of conservation has followed a development parallel to one of medicine. It relies on scientific analysis and imaging, as well as cutting-edge technology and specialized equipment. This scroll, like a patient, has a unique history, and its physical condition informed our choice of treatment. As in medicine, we follow a methodical approach when taking care of it. So first, we gather information about its background. Second, we move on to the physical examination or assessment of the damages, and then with the support of photo documentation and recording. Third, we proceed to the treatment after having carefully factored all the risks and benefits that this entails.
Right. So first things first, let's look at our patient. So let's look into its background and its life and journey through time and space until today. So the Mogao caves are also known as the caves of the Thousand Buddhas, and many of you might know about it, but I might give you an overview. So it's a Buddhist site that's formed of almost 1,000 caves that were carved on a cliff face. And about 500 of these shrines are richly decorated with painted murals and clay sculptures. They're located near the oasis town of Dunhuang, which is on this map, but you might see more clearly here, which was once strategically located at the junction between the northern and southern Silk Roads in the present day of Gansu province in northwest China, as I said in the introduction. So from the 4th to the 14th century, Dunhuang and Mogao witnessed the cultural influences of India, Tibet, China, and Central Asia. And over the course of more than 1,000 years, travelers, merchants, pilgrims, and worshippers venerated this place, which was a great center for Buddhist art and culture. And fast forward several centuries, in 1900, a Taoist monk called Wang Yuanlu, who had settled in Dunhuang and appointed himself the local caretaker of the caves, accidentally discovered a walled-up chapel as he was conducting some restoration work. And this room, so that's, sorry, I forgot to move on to the side. So that's Mogao, the Mogao caves. And here is Wang Yuanlu. So he discovered the room. Which is now commonly referred to as Cave 17 or the Library Cave, and is of particular significance in the history of the site, for it contained tens of thousands of manuscripts as well as paintings and other artifacts. So here you've got a picture taken by Stein of Cave 17, and the walled-up chapel is located to the right. You can just about see the door to it. And here is also a view of what it was like. Sorry. So this cave was probably closed off at the start of the 11th century for reasons that still remain mysterious and also debated by scholars. And the manuscripts do constitute an unprecedented source on Chinese economy, folk life, and literature, although the majority of them are actually Buddhist texts, which is what we're focused on today. So Marco Stein, who's a British-Hungarian Sanskrit scholar, archaeologist, and surveyor, led 3 successive explorations to Central Asia. So here he is, to the left. And that's again one of the photographs that he took when he arrived to Dunhuang, because he visited Dunhuang in the course of his second mission to Central Asia in 1907. And so, having heard rumors of the secret repository or cache of manuscripts, he convinced Wang Yuanlu to grant him access a few months later. And he describes in his accounts how the solid mass of manuscript bundles that were rising to a height of nearly 10 feet inside the small chamber. And he managed to acquire a very large number of manuscripts, which are now held at the British Library. And a year later, the French Pope Leo arrived at the site and took away an equally vast number of items. And both of these expeditions sparked a lot of interest among Western explorers, and the successive visits, as well as the clearing of the cave by the Chinese government in 1910, did result in the dispersal of the contents of the cave across various institutions, both private and public, around the globe. So just to give you a bit of context about this scroll, scroll S2364 measures over 2 meters long, which actually, compared to some of the other Lotus manuscript sutras in the collection, is not that long. They can be up to 13 to 15 meters long. And And it's roughly, actually this is not a picture of it, but the copy that we're going to talk about today is roughly dated to the 7th century. And the Lotus Sutra copies in the Stein Collection at the British Library actually outnumber all of the other Chinese Buddhist scriptures that were brought back by Stein during his second expedition. And in a sense, that's not too surprising, considering that it's one of the most influential scriptures of the Mahayana branch of Buddhism, and is highly regarded even to this day in a number of Asian countries, including China, Korea, and Japan. And so the text is thought to contain the historical Buddha final teaching, which was delivered at the end of his life at the Vulture's Peak. And it carries the message that all beings have the potential to attain Buddhahood in present life, and stresses the importance of faith and devotion as means to the realization of enlightenment. So the earliest known Sanskrit title for this scripture is Saddharma Pundarika Sutra, which means Sutra of the White Lotus of the Sublime Dharma. And there are 3 prevalent versions of the Lotus Sutra in Chinese. The one that's most widely represented amongst the Dunhuang manuscripts that we hold is the Miafa Lianhua Jing, or Sutra of the Lotus Flower of the Wonderful Law. And that's based on that's a translation by Kumarajiva that dates to the beginning of the 5th century, with division which can vary, but is generally based on 28 chapters spread across 7 to 8 volumes, or Chuan. And the manuscripts that we're going to be talking about actually follows that version. It actually contains chapter 25, which is a particularly popular chapter, focusing on Guanyin, the Bodhisattva of compassion, who rescues anyone who utters his name in times of trouble. So along with 793 other manuscripts of the Lotus Sutra in Chinese language that were found in the library cave, our scroll is now being conserved and digitized as part of the Lotus Sutra manuscript digitization project. So we've got a small but very productive team, which includes 1 project manager, Dunhuang Ward, 2 conservators, so Marie today, that's Maria there on the slide, and we have 2 photographers, so John and Isabel, who just joined the team. So the project is generously sponsored by the Beishan Foundation and aims to make all the images and information relating to the specific group of manuscripts available online by 2022. So all the metadata will be uploaded on the International Dunhuang Project website, otherwise known as IDP, which provides a platform where the items collected in Dunhuang and also along other sites on the eastern part of the Silk Road can be digitally reunited and freely accessed by scholars and the general public. So in a sense, this project enables us to share the collection that are in our custody with a wider audience, but also guarantees access for future generations. So it will ensure the preservation and conservation of original manuscripts, but will also reduce the risks associated with repeated handling and thereby prolonging the life of manuscripts by offering high-quality surrogates in a digital format. So now I'll...
So prior to digitization or conservation, we surveyed manuscripts to determine if they required any intervention. Nearly 87% of the material needed some form of conservation, intervention spanning from 1 hour to 100 hours. Thanks to its large scale and focus on one single Buddhist scripture, this project has given us the opportunity and scope to analyze systematically variations in the type and extent of damage encountered on the scrolls, while giving us a broad knowledge of the material used. So in Serindia, the report of his expedition to Central Asia, Stein describes the first scroll that he was shown upon his arrival at Dunhuang in 1907. It was a beautifully preserved roll of paper, yellowish in tint, remarkably strong and fresh, with its fine texture and carefully smoothed surface. This is quite a rare description of the materiality and the condition of a manuscript from the Cave 17, at the time of its discovery. Some photographs taken at the time, although staged, give us an idea of the state in which they were found. Unfortunately, what the scrolls have been through since they were deposited in the library cave and uncovered at the beginning of the 20th century has been seldom documented. So what are the main physical characteristics of a scroll from the cave 17? So first of all, it's made of materials. So its paper is made of hemp, mulberry, or bamboo fibers, dyed with huangbo or berberine, and written with carbon ink, sometimes with red ink punctuation. It is as well a format, so it's originally made of several sheets of paper joined together and rolled around a wooden core, wrapped with a cover and maintained closed with a silk tie. It has a purpose. It is a support of faith and rituals, but it's also an archaeological artifact, a treasure. It traveled, changed hands, has been handled many times by curators, catalogers, readers alike, and has gone or will potentially go through conservation and digitization. And then it has a condition. It shows signs of fabrication, creation, use, recycling, repairs, storage, travel. During surveys and assessment, and later during conservation, we describe, record, and collect any material clues, as they give us great indication of the context in which the scrolls were created and their subsequent use and history. We keep everything from sand to hair, insect casings to paper fragments. The materials are then safely placed in labeled sample bags for future reference and analysis. So here are just a selection of material evidence found on scrolls and what they could tell us. So first, the burns and oil stains, which might be evidences of rituals and Buddhist practices. Mold and water stains, which indicates the way they were stored in the cave and the potential infiltrations or flood of the river nearby. And then the trace of a hand that shows the paper making process and shows also the variety of quality and provenance of the papers. Bird and bat droppings, which shows the way they were stored in the cave and might be indication valuable to identify the scrolls that were actually used as wrappers for the bundles. And then change in calligraphy or paper, and folds and stitch holes, which are indications of reuse of scrolls. And two types of material evidence that can be found on scroll S2364 are especially caught our interest, as they show that Buddhist practitioners cared for the preservation of the scrolls. First, the use of huangbo, a vivid yellow dye extracted from the bark of the philodendron amurensis tree. The main compound berberine has been used in traditional Chinese medicine as an antibiotic, but it has also proved effective, very effective, in protecting the paper against mold, rodents, and insects. And secondly, the recycling of lesser quality hemp paper, quite coarse and fluffy, to patch the manuscripts and consolidate them.
So these historical repairs are essential to understand actually the scrolls, but also the socio-historical context to which they belonged, because they're not only an indication that the scroll sustained damage linked to its repeated use, but they also tell us that it was deemed important enough to be repaired. And so for Buddhist followers or practitioners, mending a damaged manuscript was actually a priority and a way to accrue merit. And this is documented in some of the colophons that come from the Dunhuang library cave. I've picked an example from the Stein Collection. It's not a Lotus Sutra, and I used the translation by Jazz, who is a former curator at the British Museum. So Li Hu Guanghe, having in his possession an old tattered copy of the Nirvana Sutra, has had one section of it repaired, and the repairs were completed on the 28th of February 627. So we actually know that in the 7th century already, this Buddhist practitioner actually took upon himself to get repaired by possibly professionals or people who were trained to actually conduct repairs on the scrolls. But we also know that from other colophons that monks could also do the repairs themselves. So this is the case, for instance, of Doumy, who, disturbed by the condition of the books in his monastery, took an oath to collect all texts and repair them. So it's an example from the National Library of China. So on the 29th of July 934, the disciple of Santiese, Bhiksu Doumy, having seen that among the contents of the storehouse of his temple, the set of scriptures and commentaries were incomplete, thereupon bowed his forehead to the ground, and with devout sincerity took an oath and made prayers. I will go carefully through the cartons and storehouses of all the families, seeking after old and decayed scriptural texts. I will gather them in a monastery, repair and patch them from beginning to end, and pass them down to other ages. So in a way, we are sharing the same vision in our work. So now.
So in the past, some conservation treatments were quite invasive. Some scrolls have been found with gauze and acidic paper linings on one or both sides. Nowadays, we employ repair methods with a lesser impact, using carefully selected and chemically stable papers and adhesives. We focus on stabilizing the object's condition so that it can sustain handling and that certain damages don't worsen. If possible, we also try to improve the readability of the text. The original appearance of the scroll is lost, but we wish to preserve the appearance that they had when we found them. Therefore, when achievable, we retain old patches, water stains, and creases that are part of their history and can further our understanding of the scrolls. So the scroll S2364 was in quite poor condition. It was unsafe to unroll and roll back without causing further damage. The first panels showed large oil stains, which rendered the paper very brittle. Many old patches were unevenly stuck on its verso, causing distortions and stiffness, as you can see on the pictures. Now, part of the object, the old patches originally consolidating the original scroll, were causing damage for several reasons. The paper was very different from the original, coarser, heavier. The paste or glue was liberally and unevenly applied, creating tension. And the patches were crudely cut and applied, sometimes overlapping each other, creating many distortions and uneven thicknesses. The distorted scroll had many vertical, horizontal creases, tears, losses, especially in the middle and on top and bottom edges. In addition to the old patches, two elements were not original, but seemed to have been added at the beginning and the end of the scroll to make it complete. At the beginning, a very stiff piece of paper acts as a frontispiece or cover to protect the scroll when rolled. And at the end of the scroll, a panel made of a soft paper of lesser quality bears the end title Guanyin Tinyi Chuan, written in a different hand. This translates as Guanyin Sutra in one roll in China, and this is attested in Dunhuang, chapter 25 of the Lotus Sutra, which is dedicated to the Bodhisattva of compassion, was so popular that it gradually became singled out for copying as an individual text. It seems here that the Buddhist practitioner who last used or possessed the scroll added this section to turn the manuscript, originally said to contain chapter 25 in the beginning title, into a copy, therefore complete, of the Guanyin Sutra. So what could we do to stabilize the scroll's condition? So there is a range of options to consider. First of all, no intervention, or remedial treatment, or interventive one. In the case of this scroll, no intervention meant no digitization and no access by readers or curators thus depriving the public of information. Remedial treatment would not have been enough to stabilize the scroll and could even have caused further damage, as it would not have treated the causes, only the symptoms. Before opting for the more interventive treatment, we looked at what had occurred previously to those old repairs on other scrolls. And in the past, old patches were often removed from the back of the scrolls and kept separately. A photograph taken in 1912 clearly shows the presence of paper patches at the back of the printed copy of the Diamond Sutra, as well as water stains. The patches and the stains are now gone. They were possibly removed during the treatment done prior to its first display in the exhibition of Stein's finds held in the British Museum in 1914. The removal of the patches must have been carried out with the intention of protecting the items from further damage and perhaps of revealing the textual information that they may have contained. Conservation has evolved, but it's still a tricky balancing act between risks and benefits. It is also always limited by external factors like time, money, availability of knowledge, and scientific analysis. In our case, it was necessary to lift the old patches from the scroll in order to conserve it. But in order to avoid dissociation, we decided to replace the patches back to their original place after consolidation of the original scroll. So the treatment followed these steps. We first surface clean the scroll using soft cosmetic sponges to pick up the dirt. Then we gradually humidified it with a fine mist of deionized water to relax the paper. And then we took a sample of paste and analyzed it with FTIR technology to identify its composition. It proved to be flour-based paste. Then we released the old patches from the scroll's verso and removed the paste remains using a gel to soften it. Then, so here is an example of the patches after being lifted, and you can see how different the quality is from the original paper it's attached to. It's coarser, uneven, and probably from a different region of production. Then we humidified the scroll and flattened it on the weight. We proceeded to tear repairs and infills using pre-toned Japanese paper and with starch paste. We then reattached all patches to the verso of the scroll using Japanese paper tabs and with starch paste. So here is a picture showing the choice of paper, Japanese paper, to make the paper tabs behind it. And then we supported the conserved scroll by increasing its diameter. So we use those archival grade cardboard cores to increase the diameter and help with the handling as well.
Sorry. Now we wanted to talk about what goes beyond the naked eye. So once the scroll was treated, then damage wasn't actually obscuring the readability of both the text, but also the structure or the composition of the scroll. We realized that a section of the panel that's been added to the end, so that you can see in a different hand and different paper, actually had some text hidden under the joint with the previous panel, because you could just see like bits of characters sort of sticking out, and we assumed that they might have been part of a colophon attached to the other scroll. So using, well, this is us trying with our own technology. Obviously we failed. So we went to our image scientist, Christina Duffy, who then brought on all her multispectral imaging powers. And thanks to these scientific imaging techniques, and she produced several sets of images, and by merging them together, managed to actually bring to our naked eye the text that had been hidden. So unfortunately, we haven't made as much progress on it as we were hoping initially, because it's quite a rough handwriting. So as you see, there are several question marks. If anyone here can help us solve that riddle, it'd be wonderful. But what we know from this, so we knew that a different scroll had been added at the end to make a complete sutra of Guanyin. But then we also know now that the sutra, the text that was used, the roll that was used, was much taller initially and had been trimmed to actually be the same height, because we're missing part of the date at the top. So that tells us it was produced on the 23rd day, but we're missing the months and the year, which obviously would have been wonderful pieces of information to have, because we could have had a date. And quite possibly, the person who, the scroll, the original scroll might have been commissioned by a female devotee. So this is, again, something that without the help of technology, we might not have been able to uncover. So to conclude, we would like to stress again the need for close collaboration and dialogue between conservators and curators throughout this whole process. Because together we try to ensure the conservation and preservation in the scrolls in the most sympathetic way possible. And when opting for a certain type of treatment, we seek not to warp future users' understanding of the scroll by limiting alterations to the appearance and structure of a manuscript. We intervene only when necessary and always try to keep all the elements that could potentially carry clues and information about its history and condition. So we realize that our decisions, although not made lightly, might one day need to be reversed, which will be entirely possible. That's why also we believe that information relating to the life of the collection items within the institution, such as the date and type of repairs undertaken, should also be reflected in sections of the cataloguing system that are available to the public. Because further, many years down the line, it might not be always obvious to people where repairs are. So when text can't be revealed, as is the case for the patches that remain glued to the back of the scrolls, we try to make their content available by sharing images of them, so images that were taken either when they were being conserved, before they were reattached, or through multispectral imaging. So to give you an illustration of what we have in mind, here is an example. So that's where the scrolls and images and metadata will be uploaded on the International Dunhuang project website. So that's an example of another sutra with historical repairs that was conserved and digitized. And you can see to the right that we've put on infrared photography to show the revealed text present on all patches, so that these images are displayed alongside the other digital assets of the scroll. So with the advance of technology, one can dream that we might eventually be in a position to hover over patches when consulting digital surrogates of the manuscripts, and that by clicking we might be immediately able to actually see the text that's on them. So finally, by studying such a large corpus of text and by sharing the information that we're collating, we would like to think that our work might contribute to research in fields including Buddhism, Silk Road studies, Dunhuang studies, history of the book, and conservation, to name a few. So for instance, who knows, perhaps further analysis conducted in the British Library Conservation Centre might reveal more about the history of the scrolls and help us unravel the mystery around the true nature of the library cave. Thank you.
You've been listening to a British Library podcast. For more information, visit www.bl.uk/podcast.